When Clara looked up and met his gaze, her heart pounded, her heavy belly, her calloused hands, the weight of loneliness. Everything seemed less harsh. But then the elegant woman descended from the carriage, and every word cut like a cold blow. "I am his fiancée." The distance between their worlds had never been so visible. What she thought was a refuge turned into an abyss, and now, alone in her cabin, as the blizzard closed in, she felt the first contractions tear through her body. Before we dive into this story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The morning chill pierced the air as the farmer dismounted his horse before the forest clearing. Fog enveloped everything, trunks, roots, breaths, and the silence seemed ancient, thick, untouchable. It was then that he saw her for the first time, a woman alone, with her sleeves rolled up, hammering a heavy log onto it. Her face was sweaty, despite her belly already prominent beneath the worn fabric of her dress. The sound of the hammer echoed like a harsh, stubborn prayer. He stood motionless, watching. There was something profoundly human about her, a mix of exhaustion and courage that struck him in the chest with unexpected force. That woman was building a home, not just of wood, but of resilience. The farmer, Robert, was a man of 42, owner of lands that stretched as far as the eye could see. His face was marked by the sun and by labor, his hands broad and callous, his eyes those of a man who had learned not to expect much from life. Since his wife, Helen, had died 3 years prior, he had lived surrounded by servants and silent. The estate functioned as it should. The cattle fattened, the harvests came, but loneliness was a weight he carried on an invisible burden. That morning, however, something changed. He watched the woman for a few moments, unsure what kept him. Perhaps it was her courage, perhaps the determined way she lifted each piece of wood, as if defying fate. Or perhaps it was just the curiosity of seeing someone so resolved to build something in such a remote place, so far from everything and everyone. She didn't notice him immediately. She continued working, blow after blow, raising each wall as if challenging the impossible. Sweat trickled down her forehead, even with the biting cold coming. Her fingers were red, swollen, but they didn't. There was a determination in those movements that bordered on the sacred, as if each plank nailed was a vow of. Robert dismounted his horse, tied the reins to a nearby tree, and walked slowly toward her. The sound of his own footsteps on the dry leaves seemed too loud in that. When Clara finally looked up, her heart pounded, not from fear but alert. She knew men's gazes well, the intention disguised as kindness. So, a step back, the hammer still firm in her right hand, her muscles tense, ready to defend herself if necessary. "Good morning," Robert said, taking off his hat and holding it to his chest. His voice was deep, but not threatening. "I saw you working here from a distance. Can I help?" Clara narrowed her eyes, studying the man before her. He seemed honest, but she had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. "I need nothing but time," replied, her voice firm, not meeting his gaze for long. He nodded, respecting. He didn't take another step forward, didn't insist. "I understand, but if you change your mind, my estate is just up ahead, following this trail. If you need anything, just send word." With that, he returned to his horse, mounted, and rode down the trail. Clara watched him until he disappeared among the trees, and only then did she allow her shoulders to relax. There was something about that man that intrigued her. It wasn't desire nor fear. It was something different, more subtle, respect perhaps. And how long had it been since she had seen that in anyone's eye? She returned to her work, but now her mind was divided. She wondered who he was, why he had offered help, what he wanted in return. Because there was always something in return, always. In the following days, Robert returned, not with the insistence of someone seeking something in return, but with the patience of someone who understood that trust is built slowly, brick by brick, gesture by gesture. He brought cut firewood, nails left over from the estate, a bucket of fresh well water. Clara accepted reluctantly, but the gaze that had once avoided his now sought his for brief moments, as if measuring danger and kindness in equal measure. On his third visit, he brought better tools. "Yours are too worn out," placing them on the ground beside the cabin. "These will make the work." Clara looked at the tools, then at him. "Are you doing this? Because I can, and because you need to. But you don't know me." "No, but I recognize courage when I see it." She fell silent, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to kindness without ulterior motives. She wasn't used to anything but struggle. "What's your name?" he asked one afternoon as he stacked logs beside the cabin. "Clara," she replied, without stopping her work. "I'm Robert." She nodded, but said nothing more. Robert realized that this woman was a woman of few words, and that, in some way, pleased him. He had grown tired of empty conversation, of the formalities filled the visits of neighbors and the social obligation demanded. Here, in the silence of the forest, at Clara, he felt lighter. He felt he could simply exist without needing to play a role. The cold wind blew through the tree, and the two, each in their own way, faced their own demons. Clara had fled a past she preferred to bury, abandoned while pregnant, accused of dishonor and shame. Her father had thrown her out of the house on a rainy night, shouting that she had stained the family name. Her mother had wept in silence, clinging, but hadn't had the courage to confront her husband, and the man who had sworn to love her, who had promised to care for her forever, had vanished like smoke as soon as he learned of the pregnancy. She had come to this remote place, far from everything and everyone, determined to start anew, alone, if necessary. And it was proving necessary. Robert, for his part, was a widower trapped by the memory of a woman he had loved to the limits of possibility. Helen had died of fever, taking with her a baby who had barely drawn a breath. The pain of those days still haunted him on sleepless nights, when the silence of the big house became unbearable. Since then, he had forgotten what it was like to talk without thinking about time, what it was like to smile without feeling guilty, what it was like to wake up without the sensation that something essential. But here, in that small forest clearing, something beginning to fragile, delicate but real. The cabin slowly took, each plank nailed, each corner adjusted. Each window fitted represented a small victory for Clara against the world. Robert began to appear almost every day, always with some excuse. He brought borrowed tools, helped reinforce a wall, repaired the roof that threatened to collapse under the weight of the coming snow. Gradually, conversations emerged. At first, just comments about the weather, about the harvest, about the harshness of that region. Then, more personal words, revelations that slipped out between pauses, like secrets that could no longer be contained. On a gray afternoon, while Robert adjusted a beam in the ceiling, Clara sat on a log beside the fire. Her belly was already large, and movements were becoming increasingly difficult. She watched Robert work, his body strong and sure, his hands skilled, seeming to know every type of wood, every necessary angle. There was a kindness in it that she hadn't expected to find. Not the saccharine kindness of someone seeking something, but the genuine kindness of someone who cares. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly. Robert stopped, descended the makeshift ladder, and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Do what?" "Come here. Help me. You don't even know me. You have no obligation to me." He was silent for a few moments, choosing his words carefully. "I can't quite explain it. But when I saw you here, alone, raising this house with your own hands, in the cold, with a baby in your belly, I felt that I needed to do something, not out of pity, but because it reminded me that there are still people truly fighting in this world." Clara lowered her eyes, fiddling with her calloused hands. "I'm not your responsibility. I know. That's not it." He moved closer, but maintained a respectful distance. "It's just that it's been a long time since I felt like doing anything beyond what I had to. I wake up, work, sleep. It's all mechanical. And being here, it makes me feel like I'm still capable of something more than fulfilling obligation." She raised her face and looked at him. In that gaze, there was pain, but also understanding. Two wounded hearts, each carrying their scars, finding solace in each other's presence without needing to pretend everything was fine. "You lost," Clara said, more as a statement. "Robert, my wife, Helen, and a child who barely made it to—" He lived only a few hours. Slow, almost. "Why are you here alone?" Clara took a deep breath. She knew this moment would come. Part of her wanted to keep everything hidden, but another part, tired of carrying the burden alone, needed to share the weight. "My child's father abandoned me when he found out I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready, had plans, that I was ruining everything. My family kicked me out of the house. Mother said I had brought shame upon everyone, that no decent man would want to marry me now." Her voice trembled, but didn't break. "So I came here. I took the little I had, bought this piece of land with the savings I'd secretly put together, and decided that if the world didn't want me, I would build my own world, mine And my child, Robert felt the courage of that woman was of a grandeur he had rarely seen. She wasn't there out of she was there because nothing left, and yet given up. Yet she raised walls, nailed planks, prepared a crib. You are the strongest person I've ever known. Clara smiled faintly, stout, but didn't. Robert's words echoed within her, a warm balm, soothing the wounds still. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever seen strength where everyone else saw only shame. That night, when he left, Clara watched the fire for a long time. The flames danced, rose, fell, and she thought about everything that had happened she thought about how life could be cruel and, at the same time, surprising, because there, in the middle of nowhere, with no one around, she had found someone who saw beyond appearances. For the first time since she arrived at that, Clara felt that she wasn't so alone after all. Days and their relation, without haste, without pressure. Robert brought food from the estate, ensuring Clara didn't go without. Sacks of flour, dried meat, fruit, cheese. In return, she cooked for him when he stayed late. Nothing elaborate, just simple fare, but made with care. They talked about everything and nothing, laughed at small things, shared silences that weren't uncomfortable. But Robert knew there was something he couldn't ignore forever. He was engaged. The engagement had been arranged by his father months before he met Clara. The fiancée was Beatrice, daughter of a wealthy local farmer, an alliance that would strengthen the family's business, expand their lands, and ensure prosperity for future generations. Robert had accepted out of obligation, out of respect for his father, but he had never felt anything for her. It was a business arrangement, nothing more. He knew it, she knew it, everyone. Now, however, it weighed on him like an iron chain. He knew he had to make a decision, but every time he thought about breaking off, he saw his father's face, heard the harsh words about duty, honor, responsibility. The pressure was immense, and he, accustomed to carrying responsibility since he was young, felt torn between what he should do and what he desired to do for the first time in his life, until the situation exploded in a way he hadn't expected. It was on a cold morning, with the sky heavy with dark clouds that seemed to portend a storm, that the carriage appeared on the trail. Clara was outside the cabin, hanging clothes on the makeshift line Robert had helped her build. When she heard the sound of wheels on the stones, she stopped, her heart racing. Few people passed by there, and none of them came by carriage. A carriage meant people of means meant trouble. The carriage stopped before the cabin, and a woman descended with the help of a servant. She was young, no older than 25, elegant, wrapped in light furs that contrasted with the roughness of the place. Her hair was styled impeccably, her dress was of fine fabric, and her gestures held a rehearsed, artificial delicacy. Her eyes swept over the cabin, the clothesline, the scattered tools, and then they landed on Clara, and on her swollen belly. The smile that formed on the woman's lips was polite, but cold as ice. "Well, you must be the woman my fiancé has been helping." Clara felt the ground open beneath her feet. "I'm Beatrice," the woman continued, her voice soft but laden with something sharp, cutting. "Robert's future wife." Clara couldn't respond. The words caught in her throat, choked, suffocating. Beatrice took a few steps toward the cabin, observing everything, the critical, almost disdainful gaze. "It's an interesting construction. I admire your courage for being here alone. It must be very lonely." "What do you want?" Clara managed, her voice low but firm. Beatrice turned to her, the smile disappearing like a falling. "I want to make it clear that Robert is mine. I know he comes here, I know he helps you, and I don't object to it, as long as you understand your place." Clara felt anger boiling in her chest. "I didn't ask him for anything." "Perhaps not, but men are sensitive to certain situations. And you, a woman alone, pregnant, abandoned, need protection. It's natural for him to feel responsible. He's always been like that since he was a child, always wanting to save everyone." Beatrice shrugged, examining her nails. "But this will end. As soon as we're married, he'll have other priorities. A wife, a home, legitimate children, and you, well, you'll go back to being what you've always been, alone." Clara clenched her nails, digging into her palm. "You don't need to worry. I never expected anything, and I won't start now." "Excellent. Then we understand each." Beatrice returned to the. Before getting in, she looked at Clara one last, and this time there was something genuine in that gaze, something that seemed almost pity. "Life is too hard for those who are alone." The carriage departed, kicking up dust. Clara stood still, her legs trembling, her heart aching. The truth she had tried to ignore was now exposed. raw and painful. Robert had another life, another woman, another future already mapped out, and she was just a stop, a detour in his path, nothing. When Robert arrived that afternoon, he found Clara sitting before the cold fire, her gaze distant, lost somewhere he couldn't reach. He felt that something was wrong, very wrong. Clara, did something happen? She didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, looking at the cold ashes, her arms wrapped around her knees. When she finally looked up at him, Robert saw something that chilled him. Disillusionment. Your fiancée was here on her voice low, controlled. Robert closed his eyes, guilt falling over him like an avalanche. Clara, why didn't you tell me? Because it means nothing to me. It was my father's arrangement. I never wanted it. But you're going to marry her, Clara interrupted, rising slowly. You are, aren't you? Robert but couldn't answer. The truth was, he didn't know. Not any. Before meeting Clara, the marriage was just another obligation, another item on the list of things he needed to accomplish. But now, you need to leave. Robert? No? Wait, let me explain. Leave, she cried, her voice breaking for the first time. I don't need pity. I don't need anyone who's here because they feel obligated. I'll be fine alone. I always have been. Robert took forward, but Clara recoiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Clara, please, go. He knew that insisting now would only make things worse. He saw the determination on her face, the pain she tried to hide, and realized there were no words that could fix it at that moment. So, with a shattered heart, Robert mounted his horse and left. Clara fell to her knees as soon as he disappeared from view. She wept as she hadn't in months. All the hope she had silently cherished melting away like snow in the sun. She knew she had been foolish. She knew she shouldn't have let her heart soften. She knew she shouldn't have started to depend on his presence, his gestures, his gaze, but it hurt. It hurt too much, because for the first time in a long time, she had allowed herself to believe that maybe she deserved something good, and now that illusion was shattering before her. The days that followed were the hardest since Clara had arrived at that place. She tried to keep busy, finishing the last details of the cabin, preparing what would be the baby's small room. She had bought simple fabrics in the nearest town and sewed tiny clothes by lamplight, her fingers working automatically while her mind wandered. But loneliness now had a different weight. Before it was a conscious, almost liberating. She was alone because she had decided to be, because it was better than depending on anyone. Now it was a consequence, a painful reminder that she belonged nowhere, to no one. Robert, for his part, sank into growing anger. He had returned to the estate but couldn't concentrate on anything. The employees noticed that something was wrong, whispered among themselves, but no one dared to ask. Work accumulated, decisions remained pending, and he simply went through the days in a state of stupor. Robert's father, Mr. Anthony, a stern and traditional man of 65, noticed the change in his son. He himself had been shaped by a hard life, by losses, by responsibilities that never ask if you're ready. He had built everything from scratch, expanded the lands, ensured prosperity, and he expected his son to follow the same path without detours, without weaknesses. What's happening to you? As they dined at the large table in the main house, the table was enormous, made of solid wood, but seemed even larger with only two men sitting at the end. Robert poked at his food, without appetite. Nothing. Don't lie to me, Robert. You haven't been the same since you started disappearing into the forest? Since you started helping that woman? Robert looked up, his jaw tense. That woman has a name, Clara. I'm not interested in her name. What interests me is that you are engaged. Beatrice is waiting. Her family is waiting. We have agreements. Business in progress. You can't just feel something? Want something different from the life you planned for me? Mr. Anthony slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. I planned this life to ensure the family's future, to ensure that everything I built isn't lost. Do you think I had choices? Do you think I did everything I wanted? And look how happy you are, Robert replied, his voice laden with bitterness. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Mr. Anthony stared at his son, anger giving way to something more complex, more painful. Happiness is a luxury, Robert. What matters is duty, responsibility. No. What matters is living, truly living, not just existing. And you think you'll live with her, with a woman pregnant by another man, without family, without a name. Do you think society will accept it? That business will continue? That I don't care. Robert, standing up abruptly, the chair scraped across the floor, almost tipping over. I don't care what others think. I spent 3 years dead inside, doing everything right, fulfilling every obligation. And for what? To wake up every day feeling that something is missing. And when I finally find someone who makes me feel alive again, you want me to throw everything away for the sake of agreements and appearances? Mr. Anthony also stood up, the two men staring at each other. And so you've fallen. It wasn't. It was and Robert didn't try. Fallen in love. Mr. Anthony sighed deeply, running a hand through his gray hair. Suddenly, he looked older, more tired. This won't work, Robert. You are from different worlds. She won't be able to adapt. You'll regret it. And in the end, everyone will suffer. Maybe, but I have to try, because if I don't try, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering, what if? And Beatrice, and the word you gave, I never gave my word. You gave it for me, and I'm going to undo that. I'll talk to her. I'll be honest. She deserves that. Mr. Anthony shook his head, defeated. Regret it. Perhaps, but I'll regret it more if I don't try. That same night, Robert made the decision he had been postponing. He dressed, mounted his horse, and rode to Beatrice's house, an imposing mansion surrounded by well-tended gardens, iron gates, luxury that contrasted brutally with the simplicity of Clara's. Beatrice received him in the living room, richly decorated with imported furniture, expensive paintings on the walls. She was impeccable, as always, but there was a coldness never noticed, or perhaps it had always been there, and he just wanted to see it. I've come to break off the engagement, Robert directly hired without preamble. Beatrice didn't seem surprised. She tilted her head slightly, as if analyzing a curious object. Because of her. Because of me. It wouldn't be fair to you for me to marry you without feeling anything. You deserve someone who truly chooses you. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Do you think love matters in a marriage like ours? This is business, Robert. It always has been. My parents didn't love each other, but they built an empire together. We would do the same. For you, but not for me. Not anymore. Beatrice stood up, her steps measured, controlled. She approached him, and for the first time, Robert saw something genuine. Anger, regret this. My father won't let this go easily. He has influence, he has contacts. He can make things very difficult for you and your father. I know. And her. Do you think she'll accept you? A woman who has already been abandoned once, whose family turned their backs on her, who is building a life alone precisely so as not to depend on anyone? Do you think she'll want you? The question hit Robert like a punch to the gut, because he didn't know. He wasn't sure. Clara had sent him away. Maybe she never wanted to see him again, but he had to try. Perhaps not. Oh, but I need to find out. Beatrice returned to her armchair, sitting with studied elegance. Then go. Go after your pregnant peasant woman, but don't come back when you realize you've made the wrong choice. I won't be here waiting. Robert nodded. I understand. Don't be. Just go. He left feeling relieved, but knowing that the battle was far from over. He knew there would be consequences, that his father would be furious, that the business... But for the first time in years, he was doing something because he wanted to, not because he should, and that, in some way, was already a victory. News of the broken engagement spread like wildfire through the region. Beatrice's family was furious, and her father, Mr. Jenkins, a powerful and vengeful man, began spreading rumors about Robert, trying to sully his reputation. He said Robert was irresponsible, didn't honor agreements, and wasn't trustworthy for business. Mr. Anthony entered into open conflict with his son. Shouts echoed through the house, arguments stretching into the early hours. The servants avoided passing nearby, pretending not to hear, but everyone knew what was happening. Neighbors commented in scandalized tones. The society ladies whispered at church services, afternoon teas, social gathering. Robert became the target of gossip, disapproving glances, and conversation abruptly ceased when he entered a room. But he didn't care. He mounted his horse one cold morning and rode to the forest, his heart pounding, his hands sweating despite the cold. When he reached the cabin, he found Clara sitting outside, sewing a small blanket. The weak morning sun illuminated, and Robert thought he had never seen anything so beautiful in his entire life. She looked up, hearing the horse's footsteps. Seeing him, her heart clenched. Part of her wanted to send him away again. Part of her wanted to run to him. What are you doing here? Her voice controlled, not betraying the storm raging inside her. I broke off the engagement. Clara's eyes widened. You did what? I said, I'm not marrying her. Robert dismounted and walked to Clara, but maintained a respectful distance. It wouldn't be fair to you, to me, or to her. I can't spend my whole life pretending to feel something I don't. Robert, you didn't have... I know you didn't, but I needed to, because I spent 3 years dead inside, doing everything on autopilot, just fulfilling obligations. And you made me remember what it's like to wake up wanting the day to come quickly, what it's like to truly smile. Tears streamed down Clara's face before she could stop them. But what about your family and people and the business? It doesn't matter. None of that matters if I can't be with you. Clara stood up slowly, her hands trembling. You're romanticizing this, Robert. When reality hits, when you realize the price you're paying, you'll regret it. You'll blame me. I won't. Yes, you will. Because I'm just a pregnant, abandoned flag, without family, without a name, and you are a rich, respected farmer with responsibility. Our worlds don't mix. They don't mix. Then we'll create a new world, a world of our own, where none of that matters. Clara shook her head, but her heart was at war. Part of her wanted to believe, wanted to throw herself into that but the other part, scarred by pain and abandonment, was too afraid. Afraid to give herself and end up alone again, afraid to depend and be disappointed, afraid to love and lose. I need time, she finally said, her voice low. Robert not respecting. I'll wait. As long as it... I won't give up on you, Clara. I won't. He returned to his horse, but before mounting, he turned once more. And I'm not here out of pity. I'm here because when I look at you, I see the bravest woman I've ever known. And when I'm near you, I feel complete in a way I never have before. Not even with Helen, and that scares me. But it also makes me want to fight. With that, he left, leaving Clara there, her heart aching, her mind confused, but with something new being born inside her chest. Hope, small, fragile, but real. And so, he began to visit her again, but now with greater respect. He didn't pressure, didn't demand, didn't ask for anything. He was just there, helping when she allowed it, talking when she wanted, respecting the silence when she needed it, gradually building a trust that had been shaken, but not destroyed. Days passed, and Clara felt the baby grow inside her. The movements became stronger, more real, little kicks that made her stop what she was doing and place her hand on her belly. Smiling, she talked to the child, promised that she would give everything, even if it was little. She promised that she would never, ever abandon the being growing inside her. Robert continued to come almost every day, always bringing something: food, blankets, cut firewood, repaired tools. Once, he brought a wooden crib that he himself had built on the estate. Working through, Clara was speechless at the careful work, every detail thoughtfully designed, every finish made with perfection. It's for him? Shyly, almost embarrassed. Or her, Clara corrected, smiling for the first time in days. Or her. They looked at each other, and something changed. The distance Clara had maintained, that wall of protection she had built around her heart, began to dissolve. She allowed Robert to approach, not just her body, but her heart. And Robert, more patient than he had ever been in his life, waited until she was ready. They began to talk again, as before, but now with more depth. They spoke of their childhoods, of the dreams they had, of the disappointments that had marked them. Clara told him about her mother, who had always been submissive, who never had the courage to confront her husband, not even to defend her daughter. Robert told her about the pressure of being an only child, of carrying the weight of all expectations, of never being allowed to fail. One night, as the temperature dropped sharply and the wind howled through the trees, they sat by the fire. The fire crackled, sending golden sparks into the dark sky. Clara wrapped herself in the blanket, and Robert, without thinking, put his arm around her. She didn't recoil. On the contrary, she leaned her head on his shoulder, seeking warmth, security. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For staying even when I sent you away. For being here. Kissed the top slowly with reverence. I will never give up on you, Clara. Never. And in that moment, Clara knew she had found something she thought was lost forever. Someone to trust. Someone who would stay. Someone who wouldn't run when things got tough. But life, as always, had other plans. A few days later, a letter arrived at the cabin. It was brought by a messenger who seemed uncomfortable with the mission, looking around as if afraid of being seen there. Clara took the envelope with trembling hand, and as soon as she saw the name on the edge, her blood ran cold. It was from him, Marcus, the man who had abandoned her. She opened the letter alone after the messenger had left. The words spoke of regret, of a desire for reconciliation, of empty promises she knew so well. He said he was ready to acknowledge the child, that he wanted a second, that he now realized the mistake he had made. He said his family that he had found a good job, that he could offer a better life cabin. Clara felt anger rise, boiling in her chest. She tore the paper fiercely, the pieces falling to the ground like dirty snow. She picked up the fragments and threw them into the fire. The past no longer lives here, she told herself, watching the flames consume the lying words, the broken promises. Robert arrived shortly after and noticed Clara's closed face, tension in her shoulders. Did something happen? She told him about the letter, her voice controlled but laden with emotion. Robert felt fury swell, his hands clenching into fists, but he restrained himself. What are you going to do? Nothing. He no longer has a place in my life, nor in my son's life. He threw it away. Robert nodded, respecting her decision, but deep down he knew this might not be the end. He knew men like that, men who only value what they've lost. They see someone else in their place, and he was right. Days later, Marcus appeared in person. He was young, no older than 28, well-dressed, his face marked by an arrogance Clara knew all too. He dismounted his horse and walked to the cabin as if he owned the place, as if he had some right to be there. Clara! She faced him from the doorway, her arms crossed, her chin raised. What do you want, Marcus? I want to talk about us, about the baby, about the future. There is no us, and the baby is not your concern. You made that very clear when you disappeared. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed rehearsed. I made a mistake, all right? I know I made a mistake. I was a coward. I was selfish. But I'm here now. I'm ready to take responsibility, make things right. Now, Clara laughed, the sound laden with bitterness. Now that I've built everything alone, now that I've suffered everything I had to suffer, now that I've picked myself up from the ground without anyone's help. No, Marcus, you lost the right to be here. You lost the right to talk about this baby. I am the father of this child, he insisted, taking a step forward. Tianari, you are the man who abandoned me pregnant and left me to face the world alone. That doesn't make you a father to anything. A father is someone who stays. A father is someone who cares. You're just a name on a piece of paper, nothing more. Marcus took another step, his voice hardening, the mask of regret falling away. I have rights. I can demand. You can demand nothing, Robert's voice echoed behind him, strong, determined. Marcus turned sharply, finding the farmer a few feet away, hands on his hips, his gaze hard. Have no rights. And who are you? Marcus asked, disdainfully, looking Robert up and down. Someone who was here when you weren't. Someone who saw her build this cabin plank by plank. Someone who was present when you were far away, enjoying life without worrying about the consequences. The two men stared at each other, the tension growing like stretched rope about to snap. Clara stepped between them, her voice firm, without hesitation. Marcus, leave, and don't come back, ever. Marcus looked at her, then at Robert, and realized he had lost. There was no more room for him there. He mounted his horse, but not before casting a last filled with resentment, with contained anger. You'll regret this, Kirsty, Clara, both of you. He departed in a cloud of dust, and Clara collapsed as soon as he disappeared from view. Her legs gave way, and she would have fallen if Robert hadn't caught her. She wept against his chest, all her fears and pains surfacing like a dam, finally giving way. I'm scared, she whispered between sobs. Of what? That he'll come back, that he'll try to take my child from me, that he'll use the law, his influence. I don't know. He has a rich family. He has contact, and I have nothing. Robert held her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him. And I won't let anyone take your child, I swear. Clara wanted to believe. God, how she wanted to. The fear was greater, stronger, because she knew how the world worked. She knew that the law favored men, families of means, and she was just a woman alone, without a name, without protection. But at that moment, in Robert's arms, she allowed herself to feel safe, even if only for a few moments. The blizzard arrived without warning, as it often did. The sky darkened suddenly, and the wind began to blow with terrifying force. Robert was at the estate when he noticed the change in the weather. His heart pounded. Clara was alone there, and with the blizzard, it would be impossible. Cabin. He mounted his horse with a second thought, ignoring Mr. Anthony's protest. Are you crazy? You'll die out there in this weather? She's alone. Robert's voice desperate, his fingers trembling as he tied his heavy cloak. If the baby comes now, if anything happens, you won't make it in time. This blizzard will get worse. I have to try. I can't leave her alone. Mr. Anthony grabbed his son's arm, but saw in his eyes a determination that couldn't be broken. It was the same determination he himself had when he was young. when he fought to build everything from scratch. He sighed, defeated, and at least he handed Robert an oil lantern, a thick woolen blanket, and a bottle of brandy to keep warm and come back alive, for goodness sake. Robert hugged his father quickly, tight embrace that said more than words ever could. Then he mounted his horse and rode into the blizzard that was already beginning to fall with intensity. The journey was a nightmare. The wind cut like a razor. The snow fell so dense he could barely see the path ahead. The horse struggled against the storm, its hooves slipping on the ice-covered stones. Several times Robert thought about turning back, about giving up, but then he thought of Clara alone, and that made him continue. In the cabin, Clara felt the first contractions arrive like violent waves. She was preparing dinner when she felt the first pang in her abdomen. She stopped, took a deep breath, tried to calm herself. "Not yet," she whispered to her belly. "It's not time yet." But her body had its own plan. The contractions began to come more frequently, more intensely. Clara dropped everything and went to the small room she had prepared. She lay on the bed, her hands gripping trying to control her breathing as she had read in the old books she bought in the village. Panic began to set in. She was alone, completely alone. Robert was in a state, and with the blizzard, he wouldn't be able to get there. There was no one nearby, no midwife, no help. She held her belly, tears mingling with sweat. "Please," she didn't know if to God, to fate, or just to herself. "Please, help me get through." The next few hours were the longest and most painful. The pain came in waves, stronger and closer together. She tried to remember the instructions from the books, tried to stay calm, but the fear was overwhelming. Night fell, and with it, the blizzard worsened. The wind howled like a wounded creature. The cabin trembled, and Clara was alone with her pain, with her fear, with the feeling that perhaps she wouldn't make it. But then, in the midst of the darkness and despair, she heard something, a knock at the door, faint, almost imperceptible, beneath the noise of the storm. She thought that it was the pain playing tricks on her mind. The knock, with superhuman effort, Clara dragged herself to the door and opened it. There he, Robert, covered in his face red with his lips almost purple, alive, present. "Robert," she managed to say, before another contraction doubled her over. He quickly entered, closing the door again. He picked Clara up in his arms and carried her back. "It's all right," his voice trembling with cold and emotion. "I'm here. You're not alone any." Clara gripped his hand tightly, and Robert felt the bones in his fingers creak under her grip. He didn't come. He stayed there, holding her, encouraging her. The anchor, the hours dragged. Robert built a fire, heated water, fetched the clean cloths Clara had prepared. He didn't know exactly what to do, but he did what he could, guided by instinct and by love. And then, in the early hours of the morning, when the blizzard finally began to subside, the baby came into the world. Clara pushed with all the strength she had left, a scream tearing through her throat, and felt the child slip out of her body. Robert caught the tiny being with trembling hands, wrapping him in a soft cloth. And then, the most beautiful sound a cry, strong, indignant, full of life. "It's a boy," Robert's voice choked, tears streaming down his face. He gently cleaned the baby, cut the cord as Clara instructed him, and then placed the child in her arms. Clara looked at her son for the first time. He was small, red, his tiny eyes closed, his minuscule fists clenched. Perfect, absolutely perfect. "Gabriel," she whispered, kissing her son's forehead. "Your name is Gabriel, and you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Robert knelt beside the bed, looking at mother and child with a mix of reverence and love so intense it hurt. In that moment, he knew that this was his family, that woman, that baby. They were his, and he was theirs. Clara looked up at Robert, and in her gaze there was gratitude, relief, and something more, something deep, frightening, wonderful. "Thank you for coming, for being here. I'll always be here," Robert, holding her hand, always. And in that moment, as the blizzard finally ceased outside and the first rays of sun began to paint the sky, 3 lives intertwined definitively. The days that followed Gabriel's birth, tense, transformative. Clara recovered slowly, her body still sore, but the joy of holding her son in her arms surpassed any discomfort. Robert divided his time between the estate and the cabin, but his heart was in that small space that smelled of burnt wood and warm milk. He helped with everything. He changed the baby when Clara was. rocked the little one to, prepared simple but nutritious meals. He had never imagined he was capable of doing these, never thought he would have the opportunity to care for, but there he was, discovering a fatherhood that was not of blood choice. That choice was stronger than any biological bond. The outside world would not remain silent forever. The scandal wasn't long in reaching the estate. Local society murmured with greater intensity. The churchwomen organized meetings to discuss the deplorable situation. Businessmen began to avoid Mr. Anthony, fearing association with. The pastor delivered a veiled sermon about family duties and correct paths. Mr. Anthony, who had initially resisted with all his might, began to feel the weight of the consequences. Business suffered. Some contracts were canceled. Doors that had once been open began to close. He was furious, embittered, but also conflicted. One afternoon, he decided to go to the cabin. He needed to see with his own eyes what was causing such an uproar. What was making his son abandon responsibilities? Clara was outside, hanging diapers on the clothesline, when she saw the imposing man dismount his horse. She recognized him immediately. The same eyes as Robert, the same bearing, Mr. Anthony. Her heart raced. She picked up Gabriel, who was sleeping in the crib, and held him against her chest, protectively. Robert wasn't there at that moment. He had returned to the estate to sort out some matters. You must be Clara, stopping of a stern, not threatening. I am, and you must. I am. He was silent, observing the cabin, the clothesline, the woman before him. He saw something in her he expected. Dignity. There was pride in her strength in her gaze. She wasn't the opportunist he had imagined, the manipulative woman everyone spoke of. She was simply someone fighting to survive. "May I see the child?" he asked, surprising him. Clara hesitated, but then approached slowly. She gently pulled back the fabric covering Gabriel's face. The baby was awake, his dark eyes open. Mr. Anthony looked at them and felt something within his chest break, something rigid he had kept closed. The baby had the same eyes as Helen, Robert's deceased wife, the same curved, the same serene expression. "He looks like," his voice hoarse. "Like whom?" Clara asked, confused. "Like Helen, Robert's wife, my daughter-in-law." Mr. Anthony extended his hand hesitantly, and Clara, after a moment's doubt, allowed him to touch the baby's. The old man's calloused fingers brushed the soft cheek, and he felt his eyes sting. "What's his name?" Gabriel Anthony." Mr. Anthony's eyes widened. "Us? You named him after me?" Robert said it was important, that you were important. The old man felt his throat too tight to speak. All the harsh words he had prepared, all the arguments, all the accusation disappeared. There, before that child, before that woman who clearly loved his son, he realized something fundamental. He was wrong. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice low. "I'm sorry for judging without knowing, for being hard on my son, for forgetting that the most important thing is love, not convention." Clara felt tears stream down her face. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected understanding, much less an apology. "Robert loves you. He never loved Beatrice, never loved anyone the way he loves you. And when I saw him after he met you, I saw my son alive again. I saw joy in his eyes. And that's worth more than any business, any social." "You're losing a lot because of this," Clara said. "I know about the problems that are happening. Problems pass. Businesses recover. But having my son happy, that's priceless." He looked at Gabriel once more. "You are welcome at the estate whenever you want. The house is big. There's plenty of room. And this boy deserves to grow up with a real family." Clara didn't. The words. When Robert arrived and saw his father, he the worst. But then Mr. Anthony approached, and for the first time in years, hugged his son, tight embrace, laden with everything they couldn't say. "I was wrong," whispered, "and I'm sorry." Robert felt tears stream down his face. "Take good care of your family." "I will, I swear." He mounted his. Before leaving, he turned one and bring them for dinner next week. "I want to introduce my grandson to staff." The forgiveness, timid yet genuine, filled the air like the first sun after a storm. And for the first time since everything began, Robert felt that maybe, just maybe, things could work. Months passed, and life settled into unexpected ways. The cabin grew with the help of Robert and some of the estate staff that Mr. Anthony sent. They gained a larger bedroom, a spacious porch, a small stable. The walls Clara had built alone were now touched by Gabriel's laughter, who grew strong and healthy, and by the peaceful echo of footsteps of those who found a home. Clara and Gabriel began to visit the estate regularly. At first, Clara felt out of place in that big house, with fine furniture and servants everywhere. But Mr. Anthony made sure to treat her with respect, and little by little she got used to it. The staff, who initially looked on with suspicion, were won over by Clara's simplicity and strength. She helped in the kitchen when she visited, played with the workers' children, talked to everyone without airs of superiority. She didn't try to be something she wasn't, and that, ironically, made her accepted more quickly than any society lady could have been. Robert now lived divided between the estate and the cabin. His heart was in the forest, but his responsibilities were in the lands he would one day inherit. In time, he found a balance. He worked hard during the day, tending to business, recovering lost contracts, rebuilding the family's reputation, and at dusk he rode to the cabin where Clara and Gabriel awaited him. One day, Clara found an old horseshoe stable Robert had built next to the cabin. It was bent, broken at one end, covered in rust. It up, curious, and took it to Robert. "What's this?" Robert took the horseshoe, observing it carefully. A sad smile appeared on his lips. It was Helen's mare's. It broke shortly before everything happened. I kept it, but I never knew what. I guess I brought it without realizing when I was organizing the tools. Clara touched the horseshoe, feeling the cold, rough metal under her fingers. "Can you fix it?" Robert looked intrigued. "I think so." "Why?" "Because sometimes things break, but they can still be useful. Sometimes they even become stronger after they're fixed." He understood the metaphor immediately. In the following days, Robert worked on the horseshoe. He heated the iron in the forge, struck with precision and patience, reshaped it. The work was almost meditative. Each hammer blow a way to process everything that had happened, everything that had changed. When he finished, the horseshoe was almost like new, with only small marks that told its story. The scars of the iron, like theirs, were visible, but they didn't prevent the piece from being useful again. "It still works," he said, showing Clara. She smiled, understanding complete, "Just like us." Robert pulled her close, kissing her forehead with tenderness. "Just like us." Gabriel was almost a year old, crawled through the grass, his tiny hands trying to catch the butterfly that passed by. His laughter was like music, filling the air with pure and innocent joy. Every now and then he would look back at making sure his mother and Robert were there, and then continue his exploration. Clara watched her son with a love so intense it sometimes hurt. She thought of everything she had been through, all the tears she had, all the moments she thought she wouldn't make it. Now here she was, with a healthy son, a man who truly loved her, and a place she could call home. "Are you happy?" Robert asked, hugging her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "More than I ever imagined," Clara ripped, her hands covering his on her belly. "After everything, I never thought I could have this." "Me neither. I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness when Helen died. But then you appeared, stubborn, building a house alone in the middle of the forest." He chuckled. "And you changed everything for me, too. You gave me hope when I—" They stood there, embraced, watching Gabriel, feeling the cool afternoon breeze. From the top of the field, the view stretched for miles, showing the estate lands, the forest beyond, the mountains in the distance. That night, when Gabriel finally fell asleep after much resistance, Clara and Robert sat on the porch, sharing a blanket. The stars shone in the clear sky, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. "I married Helen very young," Robert said suddenly, his voice low and reflective. "It was what was expected, what everyone wanted, and I loved her. I truly loved her. But now, looking back, I realize it was a love, how can I say, a love of you, of idealization, with you. It's different, way different how. It's real, it's raw, it's complete. There are no masks, no illusions. I see you on your worst mornings, with your hair disheveled, exhausted from caring for Gabriel all night, and I think you're the most beautiful woman in the world. I see your strength, your flaws, your doubts, and I love you even more for—" Clara felt her sting, was so afraid of getting hurt again. "And now? Now I know you won't leave? That you stayed even when I sent you away, that you chose to stay even when it was difficult." She turned to him, holding his face in her hands. "And I love you, Robert, in a way that scares me, in a way I've never loved anyone before." They kissed under the stars, and it was a kiss unlike any other. It was a promise, a commitment, a silent vow that no matter what came, they would face it together. In the following weeks, Robert began to make plans. He wanted to make everything official. He wanted Clara and Gabriel to have his last name. He wanted them to be legally recognized as a family. But he knew there were still obstacles. The biggest of them appeared one rainy afternoon. Marcus returned, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought a lawyer and documents that, he claimed, proved his paternity and gave him rights over Gabriel. Clara felt her world crumble when she saw the two men descending from the carriage, Robert estate, and she was alone with Gabriel. "I've come for my son. He's cold. He's not your son. You gave him up when—" "The law doesn't see it that way." The lawyer, a thin man interjected. "Mr. Marcus has rights as the biological, and we are willing to resolve this in the most civilized way." "Civilized?" Clara felt anger. "There's nothing civilized about trying to tear a child from its mother, to tear anything away." But his gaze was calculated. "We just want what's rightfully ours. You can even continue to see him, but he will live with me, bear my name, be raised as he should be, not in a cabin in the middle of nowhere." Clara held Gabriel tighter, the baby beginning to cry as he sensed his mother's tension. "You won't take my son. You'll have to kill me first." At that moment, the sound of approaching horses. Robert arrived, and with him Mr. Anthony and 3 more estate workers. They had been warned by one of the workers who had passed by the trail and seen the carriage. "What's going on here?" Robert asked, dismounting his horse with abrupt movement. "I've come for my son, Marcus." But now his voice held less certainty. "Your son?" Robert walked, and he stood between Marcus and Clara. "You have no son here. You have a name on a piece of paper. Nothing more." "The law. The law can say whatever it wants," Mr. Anthony interjected, his imposing presence silencing everyone. "Hey, but any judge will to know you were when this woman was cold, hunger, pain. They'll want to know why it took a year to They'll want to know if your intention were truly about the pride." The lawyer consulted some papers, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Anthony lump, "With all due respect, respect is what this young man here didn't have when he abandoned a pregnant woman. Respect is what my son had when he stayed, when he helped, when he took on responsibilities that weren't his." Mr. Anthony took a step forward. "Now tell me, do you really want to take this to court? Because I have resources, I have lawyers, and I have a story to tell that won't make you look good." Marcus and the lawyer exchanged glances. They knew they were at a disadvantage. Robert's family had influence, and more importantly, they had the moral high ground. "This isn't over," but he was already retreating toward the carriage. "It is over, and if you come back here, if you go near Clara or Gabriel again, you'll have to deal with me. And I'm not as civilized as my father." The threat was clear. Marcus got into the carriage and departed, but everyone knew that might not be the end. That night, Robert made a decision. "We're getting married tomorrow, if possible. I want you and Gabriel to have my name, my protection. I want it to be official." Clara looked at her eyes brimming with tears. "Are you sure? Because after this, there's no turning back. You'll be tied to the problems that come with me. I want to be tied to you. I want to wake up every day knowing you're my wife, that Gabriel is my son. I want to build a real, not just drift through it." He held her hand. "Marry me. Let me make you happy for the rest of our lives." She couldn't answer with words. She just nodded, crying, laughing, feeling that finally, she had found her place in the world. The wedding was simple, held at the estate with only the closest people. Clara wore a simple but beautiful dress that Mr. Anthony insisted on buying. Gabriel, a year and a half old, was in his grandfather's arms, mistaking everything for a big game. When the minister asked if they accepted each other, both answered with firm voices without hesitation. And when they kissed as husband and wife, it was as if the whole world stopped for a moment. The cabin, which was once a symbol of solitary resistance, a home built with wood, sweat, tears, but above all, love. And as the sun set behind the mountain, painting the sky orange and pink, Clara leaned against Robert, Gabriel in her arm, and felt that she was finally at peace. There, in that forgotten patch of land, 3 wounded souls found healing. They found belonging. They found family. And life, which for so long seemed impossible, flourished again, log by log, gesture by gesture, until it became something new, strong and whole. The mended horseshoe hung on the cabin wall, a permanent reminder that broken things can be repaired, that scars are not weakness, but proof that we survive, that new beginnings are possible, even when all seems lost. And every night, when they lay down to sleep, Robert held Clara in his arms and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up, for building this home, for letting me be a part of your life." And she always replied, "Thank you for staying, for choosing us, for seeing strength where everyone else saw shame." Gabriel grew strong, healthy, loved. He would never know all the battles so that he could simply exist, but one day, when he was older, they would tell him a cabin built in cold, about the mother who didn't give up, about the man who chose a father even without a biological obligation, and Gabriel would understand that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. It's about who stays when everything falls apart. It's about who builds with you, plank by plank, a place you can call home. And so ends the journey of Clara, Robert, and Gabriel, a story about new beginnings, about courage, about the love that heals and rebuilds. If this narrative touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share what you felt in the comments. What was the moment that moved you the most? Believe in second chance. Have you ever had to start from scratch? Tell us your story. Because each of us carries our battles, our victories, our scars. And remember, just like that horseshoe, you too can be mended. Your wounds can turn into strength. Your new beginnings can become beautiful stories. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories we'll bring. Until next time, and may hope never abandon your heart.